The first time Maya felt true terror, she was 7 years old, hiding beneath her family's kitchen table while alien ships descended from the sky like falling stars. The Vorthak had come to Earth not as conquerors seeking resources or territory, but as farmers seeking something far more precious: human fear. Maya's mother, Sarah, pressed her trembling hand against her daughter's mouth, both of them watching through the window as their neighbors ran screaming down the street. The alien vessels hovered silently above their suburban neighborhood, their dark hulls pulsing with an eerie blue light that seemed to drink in the panic below. "Don't look, baby," Sarah whispered. But Maya couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene unfolding outside. Mr. Henderson from next door stumbled and fell, his face twisted in absolute terror, as a beam of that same blue light enveloped him. For a moment, he simply froze, his mouth open in a silent scream, before collapsing to the ground unconscious. The Vorthak had discovered something remarkable about human beings during their initial reconnaissance missions. While other species they had encountered throughout the galaxy experienced fear as a simple survival mechanism, humans possessed an extraordinary capacity for terror that bordered on the supernatural. Their fear was pure, concentrated, and most importantly, it was delicious. Maya's father, David, burst through the front door, his military uniform torn and his face pale with exhaustion. He had been stationed at the nearby Air Force base when the invasion began, and the stories he brought home painted a picture of humanity's complete helplessness against these beings who fed on terror itself. "They're not here to kill us," David gasped, pulling his wife and daughter into a tight embrace. "They're here to farm us. Every human on Earth is now livestock, and our fear is their harvest." The explanation came over the emergency broadcast system later that night, transmitted by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the few xenobiologists who had survived the initial contact attempts. Her voice crackled through their radio as the family huddled together in their basement. "The beings calling themselves the Vorthak appear to be energy vampires of a sort." "Dr. Core," Rodriguez explained, her clinical tone barely masking her own terror. "They consume what they call terror essence, the specific neurochemical cocktail produced by human brains when experiencing extreme fear. Initial reports suggest they can sustain themselves entirely on this energy source, making humans the perfect renewable resource." Maya listened to every word, her young mind processing information that would have broken many adults. She learned that the Vorthak were an ancient species, having traveled the galaxy for millennia in search of beings capable of producing the pure terror they required for survival. They had found traces of it in other species, fleeting moments of panic that provided barely enough sustenance to keep them alive. But humans, with their complex emotional systems and vivid imaginations, were a feast beyond their wildest dreams. The blue light that pulsed from their ships was more than just illumination. It was a fear amplifier, designed to trigger the deepest terrors buried in the human psyche. Under its influence, a person's worst nightmares would manifest as almost real hallucinations, generating waves of pure terror that the aliens could harvest and consume. Over the following weeks, Maya watched as her world transformed into a nightmare landscape. The Vorthak established what they called fear farms, massive installations where humans were kept in a constant state of controlled terror. The lucky ones were allowed to remain in their homes, subject to random harvest sessions, where the aliens would descend and expose entire neighborhoods to their fear-inducing technology. Maya's family was among these free-range humans, living each day in constant dread of the next harvest. She watched her parents age years in a matter of weeks, their faces becoming gaunt and hollow as the repeated exposure to artificial terror drained them of more than just fear. It was stealing their very souls. The child began to notice something strange during the third harvest session. While her parents and neighbors writhed in terror around her, Maya found herself studying the aliens with a curious detachment. She was afraid, certainly, but there was something else growing inside her, a cold, calculating anger that seemed to shield her from the worst effects of their fear-inducing technology. The Vorthak were tall, skeletal beings with translucent gray skin that revealed the dark circulatory systems beneath. Their heads were elongated, with large black eyes that seemed to drink in the terror around them. Most disturbing of all were the feeding appendages that extended from their chests, writhing, tentacle-like organs that glowed with absorbed fear energy. During that third harvest, Maya made a discovery that would change everything. As she watched one of the creatures feeding on her neighbor Mrs. Chen's terror, she noticed something the adults had missed. The alien's feeding appendage pulsed in a specific rhythm, 3 quick flashes followed by 2 long ones. And just before it fed, its large black eyes would dilate in a particular pattern. Maya realized the aliens were not the emotionless, superior beings they appeared to be. They had their own fears, their own vulnerabilities. The rhythmic pulsing wasn't just feeding, it was a nervous habit, like a human biting their nails. The eye dilation wasn't predatory focus, it was anxiety. That night, as her parents slept fitfully in the basement, Maya crept to her father's old military footlocker. Inside, she found his field notes from the first days of the invasion, along with classified reports he had managed to smuggle home before the base fell. She couldn't read all the technical language, but she understood enough to piece together a crucial fact. The Vorthak had never encountered resistance to their fear-inducing technology. Every species they had fed upon throughout their millennia of existence had been completely helpless against their abilities. They had never needed to develop defenses because they had never faced a threat. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that their prey would always be paralyzed by terror. Maya spent the next several nights secretly studying the aliens during harvest sessions, hiding in places where she could observe without being noticed. She began to see patterns in their behavior, weaknesses in their seemingly perfect system of terror farming. The aliens always fed in the same sequence, starting with the most terrified individuals and working their way down. They seemed to prefer certain types of fear. Childhood phobias produced a brighter glow in their feeding appendages than adult anxieties. Most importantly, they appeared to be unable to feed on subjects who were experiencing other strong emotions simultaneously with their fear. During one particularly brutal harvest session, Maya watched as her elderly neighbor, Mr. Petrov, experienced what she would later understand was a heart attack brought on by terror. But in his final moments, as he clutched his chest and gasped for air, his expression changed from fear to something else: anger, defiance, perhaps even pity for his alien tormentors. The Vorthak feeding on him suddenly recoiled, its appendages flashing with what looked like pain. That's when Maya understood. The aliens weren't just feeding on fear, they were vulnerable to its absence. Strong emotions that contradicted terror could actually harm them. Love, anger, determination, even curiosity could serve as weapons against beings who had never learned to defend themselves against anything but helplessness. Maya began to formulate a plan that adults would have dismissed as the fantasy of a traumatized child. But she had advantages that the grown-ups lacked. She was small enough to move unseen, young enough to adapt quickly to impossible circumstances. And most importantly, she was beginning to feel something that no other human on Earth was experiencing. She was no longer afraid of the Vorthak. Instead, she was starting to feel sorry for them. The aliens had traveled the stars for thousands of years, surviving only by inspiring terror in other beings. They had never learned to create, to build, to find joy or purpose beyond the consumption of fear. They were, Maya realized, the most pitifully limited creatures she had ever encountered, and that realization was about to become their undoing. As she lay in her bed that night, listening to her parents whisper about escape plans that would never work, Maya made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. She was going to do something no human had attempted since the invasion began. She was going to make contact with the Vorthak, not as prey cowering before predators, but as a child who had seen through their terrible facade and found them wanting. The next morning brought news over the emergency broadcast system that the aliens were expanding their operations. Dr. Rodriguez's voice, now noticeably weaker after weeks of repeated harvest sessions, announced that the Vorthak had begun construction of larger fear farms designed to hold entire cities' worth of humans. Their feeding has become more efficient, she reported, her words punctuated by static and what sounded like distant screaming. They're learning to refine our terror, to extract more energy from each individual. Current projections suggest they could sustain themselves indefinitely using Earth's population as a renewable resource. Maya listened to the broadcast while helping her mother prepare what had become their standard breakfast: canned food heated over a camping stove, eaten in the basement where they felt safest. But safety was an illusion, and Maya was tired of living in an illusion. "Mom," she said quietly, setting down her fork, "I want to talk to one of them." Sarah nearly choked on her food. "What did you say?" I want to talk to one of the aliens. I think they're scared too. David looked up from his own meal, his military training warring with his parental instincts. Maya, honey, these things are not like us. They don't feel scared the way we do. Yes, they do, Maya insisted with the absolute certainty that only a child could possess. I've been watching them, Daddy. They're scared of something. Maybe they're scared of being hungry. Maybe they're scared of dying. But they're definitely scared. Her parents exchanged worried glances over her head. The repeated exposure to the fear-inducing technology was known to cause psychological damage in adults. Perhaps it was affecting their daughter in unexpected ways. But Maya continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident. And if they're scared, then maybe we can help them find something better than being scary all the time. That afternoon, as if summoned by her words, the blue light appeared outside their windows again. Another harvest session was beginning. Maya watched her parents begin their familiar routine of hiding and trembling. But this time, she had a different plan. As the Vorthak vessel settled over their neighborhood, and the fear-inducing technology began its terrible work, Maya did something unprecedented. She walked outside. The blue light enveloped her immediately, and she felt the familiar tendrils of artificial terror trying to take hold of her mind. But instead of fighting the fear or surrendering to it, she did something else entirely. She acknowledged it, accepted it, and then set it aside like a tool she didn't need. Standing in her front yard while her neighbors cowered in their homes, 7-year-old Maya looked up at the alien ship and called out in her clear, high voice, "I'm not afraid of you anymore. Come down here and talk to me." The response was immediate and unprecedented. The blue light flickered and dimmed. The ship's humming changed pitch, and for the first time since the invasion began, a Vorthak vessel actually descended to ground level in response to a human's words rather than their screams. Maya stood her ground as the alien ship landed in the middle of her street, its massive bulk crushing 2 abandoned cars. A hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air, and 3 Vorthak emerged, their feeding appendages writhing in apparent confusion. They approached her slowly, clearly uncertain how to handle a human who showed no signs of the terror that was their sustenance. Maya could see their alien minds struggling to process this unprecedented situation. A human child who not only failed to flee but had actively summoned them. "Hello," Maya said politely, as if greeting new neighbors rather than the beings who had enslaved her entire species. "My name is Maya. What are your names?" The lead Vorthak stopped dead in its tracks. In all their millennia of existence, no prey species had ever asked for their names. They had never needed names when dealing with creatures that could only scream. And in that moment of confusion, of complete bewilderment at this tiny human's impossible behavior, Maya saw exactly what she had hoped to see. In the alien's large black eyes, she glimpsed something that proved her theory correct. Fear. The Vorthak were afraid of her. The silence that followed Maya's greeting stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The 3 Vorthak stood frozen in her suburban street, their feeding appendages twitching nervously as they tried to process this impossible situation. Behind them, their ship hummed with an uncertain pitch that Maya was beginning to recognize as their equivalent of stammering. The lead Vorthak finally spoke, its voice emerging from somewhere deep within its elongated skull as a sound like wind through broken glass. "You seek to know our designation?" Maya nodded eagerly, as if this were the most normal conversation in the world. "Yes, please. It's polite to introduce yourself when you meet someone new. My mom taught me that." The alien's large black eyes dilated and contracted rapidly, the anxiety pattern Maya had learned to recognize. "I am Harvester Prime Unit 779. These are secondary units 423 and 885. "Those aren't really names," Maya said with the brutal honesty of a 7-year-old. "Those are like job titles. Don't you have real names? Names your friends call you?" The question seemed to break something fundamental in the alien's understanding of reality. Harvester Prime Unit 779 tilted its head at an angle that would have been impossible for a human neck, its feeding appendages curling inward defensively. "We do not possess the concept of friends," it said slowly. "We are designated by function within the collective. That sounds lonely, Maya observed, and something in her voice, genuine sympathy rather than fear, caused all three aliens to take a step backward. Don't you ever want someone to just like spending time with you, not because they have to, but because they want to? Around them, Maya could hear the sounds of her neighbors beginning to emerge from their hiding places. Windows were opening cautiously, faces peering out in amazement at the impossible scene playing out in their street. A human child was having a conversation with their alien oppressors, and somehow, the Vorthak seemed to be the ones who were uncomfortable. Your emotional emanations are irregular. Secondary Unit 423 observed, its own feeding appendages reaching toward Maya but then recoiling as if burned. We cannot process your terror. Why do you not flee? Maya considered this question seriously, the way children do when adults ask them to explain something that seems obvious. Because running away won't fix anything. And because I think you're sadder than you are scary. The word sad seemed to hit the aliens like a physical blow. All three of them staggered slightly, their translucent skin flickering between its normal gray and something approaching pale blue. We do not comprehend this term in relation to ourselves, Harvester Prime Unit 779 said, but its voice had lost some of its mechanical certainty. We are the Vorthak. We are eternal. We are... You're hungry all the time, Maya interrupted gently. That's what hungry does to people. It makes them do things they don't really want to do because they're scared of starving. Maya's mother had appeared on the front porch, her face white with terror and maternal protectiveness warring in her expression. Maya, honey, come inside right now. But Maya shook her head without taking her eyes off the aliens. It's okay, Mom. They're not going to hurt me. Are you? She asked, directing the question to Harvester Prime Unit 779. The aliens' response revealed something that would change everything humanity thought they knew about their invaders. We cannot. Your fear is insufficient for consumption. Harvesting from you would provide no sustenance. But it's more than that, isn't it? Maya pressed, stepping closer to the towering alien. You don't want to hurt me. I can see it in your eyes. This was the moment that Secondary Unit 885 made a sound that no human had ever heard from a Vorthak before. A low, keening wail that spoke of confusion, loneliness, and something that might have been grief. We do not understand what is occurring, it said, its mechanical voice cracking with something approaching emotion. Your species was to be simple prey, efficient producers of terror essence. Instead, you present us with concepts we lack frameworks to process. Maya's father had joined her mother on the porch, his military instincts screaming at him to rush out and grab his daughter. But something in the aliens' posture, the way they seemed to be leaning away from Maya rather than threatening her, kept him frozen in place. Maybe that's because you never tried to understand anyone before, Maya said, her child's wisdom cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Maybe you just ate their fear and left without learning who they really were. This conversation is causing us distress, Harvester Prime Unit 779 admitted, and Maya could see that admission cost it something significant. We have never experienced distress. We do not possess protocols for managing distress. Maya reached into the pocket of her small jacket and pulled out something that made all three aliens recoil in apparent shock. A small stuffed elephant, worn and faded from years of love and comfort. This is Mr. Corin, Peanuts, she said, holding up the toy. When I'm scared or sad or upset, he helps me feel better. Do you have anything like that? The question seemed to physically pain the aliens. Secondary Unit 423's feeding appendages writhed in what looked like agony. We possess no comfort objects, it said. We possess no comfort. We possess only hunger and the satisfaction of feeding. That sounds terrible, Maya said with complete sincerity. No wonder you're all so mean. I'd be mean too if I was hungry and scared all the time and didn't have any friends or toys or anyone to hug me when I felt bad. Around them, Maya's neighbors had begun to gather at a respectful distance, drawn by the unprecedented sight of humans and Vorthak engaged in actual communication. Among them, Maya spotted Dr. Jokata Rodriguez, who had somehow made her way to their suburb despite the chaos engulfing the city. The xenobiologist approached slowly, her scientific mind racing to document everything she was witnessing. This was the first peaceful contact between the species, and it was being conducted by a 7-year-old girl who seemed to understand the aliens better than all the world's experts combined. Maya, Rodriguez called softly. Can you ask them something for me? Maya turned to look at the scientist, then back at the aliens. Dr. Rodriguez wants to ask you something, is that okay? The three Vorthak exchanged what might have been glances, though their alien facial structure made such expressions difficult to read. Finally, Harvester Prime Unit 779 nodded slowly. The small human may relay the inquiry, it said. Dr. Rodriguez took a deep breath. Ask them about their homeworld. Where did they come from? What happened to make them need to feed on fear? Maya dutifully repeated the question, and the response that followed would reshape humanity's understanding of their invaders forever. We originate from the void between stars, Secondary Unit 885 said, its voice taking on a quality that might have been longing. Our homeworld was consumed by its own star 12,000 cycles ago. We escaped in vessels such as this, but we were changed by the experience. Changed how? Maya asked. We lost the capacity to sustain ourselves through conventional means. The terror of watching our world burn, the fear of facing extinction as a species. These emotions became our only source of nourishment. We learned to feed on terror because it was the only energy source available to us in the aftermath of our loss. Dr. Rodriguez felt her knees go weak as the implications hit her. The Vorthak weren't natural predators. They were refugees. Survivors of a cosmic disaster who had been forced to become something monstrous just to stay alive. Maya, however, focused on the emotional core of the revelation rather than its scientific implications. You lost your home, she said softly. And everyone you loved died when your star exploded. That's why you're so scared and sad. You've been scared and sad for 12,000 years. The effect of her words on the three aliens was immediate and profound. Their feeding appendages went completely still, their dark skin rippling with patterns of bioluminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some internal distress. We do not experience sad, Harvester Prime Unit 779 said, but its voice had dropped to almost a whisper. We experience only hunger and the imperative to survive. But hunger can make you sad, Maya pointed out with inexorable child logic. And being scared all the time can make you sad too. And not having any friends definitely makes you sad. I think you've been sad for so long you forgot what it was called. Secondary Unit 423 made that keening sound again, longer this time, and Maya was startled to see what looked like moisture gathering in its large black eyes. We were different before the burning, it said slowly, as if the words were being dragged from some deep, buried place. We created beauty. We cultivated growing things. We formed bonds of affection with others of our kind. You had families, Maya breathed, understanding flooding through her. You had art and gardens and people you loved, and then it all got taken away and you had to become scary just to not die. The gathering crowd of humans had grown silent, many of them seeing their alien oppressors in an entirely new light. These weren't cosmic monsters who had chosen to torment humanity for pleasure. They were broken beings, clinging to existence through the only means left to them after losing everything that had once made their lives meaningful. Rodriguez found her voice again. Maya, can you ask them something else? Ask them if they remember what they used to eat before the burning. When Maya relayed the question, Secondary Unit 885 responded with something that sounded almost like poetry. We consumed light, it said. The light of our star, filtered through crystalline formations that we cultivated over centuries. Our cities were gardens of living crystal that sang in harmonies of pure energy. We fed on beauty, on harmony, on the joy of creation itself. Maya's eyes widened as she began to understand the true scope of the tragedy. So when your star died, you didn't just lose your homes and families. You lost your food too. You lost everything that made you happy. Happiness, repeated Harvester Prime Unit 779, as if testing the weight of an alien concept. We retained data archives describing this emotional state, but we had concluded it was no longer accessible to us. But it could be, Maya said with the absolute confidence of youth. You could learn to be happy again. You could learn to eat something besides fear. You could learn to have friends. The three aliens stood in stunned silence, processing concepts that had been foreign to them for 12 millennia. Around them, the assembled humans waited, sensing they were witnessing something that might be the most important moment in their species' history. Finally, Harvester Prime Unit 779 spoke again, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been hope. "Small human Maya," it said. "We lack understanding of how such transformation might be achieved. Our neural pathways have adapted to terror consumption over countless cycles. We are uncertain whether alternatives remain possible." Maya stepped closer to the towering alien, close enough that she had to crane her neck back to look up at its face. In her small hand, she still clutched Mr. Boya, Peanuts, the stuffed elephant that had comforted her through countless childhood fears. "Everything seems impossible until someone figures out how to do it," she said. "My daddy taught me that. And I think maybe I know someone who could help you learn to eat something better than being scared all the time." She looked around at the gathered crowd, her gaze finally settling on Dr. Rodriguez. "Dr. Rodriguez knows all about energy and biology and stuff like that. And she's really smart. Maybe she could help you figure out how to eat light again. Or music. Or other good feelings instead of fear." Dr. Rodriguez felt the weight of unprecedented responsibility settling on her shoulders. The entire future of human-Vorthak relations, possibly the survival of both species, might depend on whether she could find a way to help these broken aliens rediscover their capacity for joy. I would need to study their biology," she said slowly. "To understand how their digestive systems have adapted, it would require cooperation, trust." "But it might be possible?" Maya asked eagerly. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the three aliens, seeing them now not as monsters but as patients, beings suffering from 12,000 years of trauma-induced adaptation. "It might be possible," she agreed. Maya beamed with the radiant joy that only children could achieve, and something unprecedented happened. The three Vorthak stopped trying to feed on the emotions around them and simply absorbed her happiness. For the first time in millennia, they experienced positive emotional energy not as a food source but as a gift freely given, and for just a moment, their gray skin took on the faintest hint of the bioluminescent patterns they had once displayed in their crystal gardens, before the burning, before the fear, before they forgot what it meant to be truly alive. Maya held out Mr. Solitage, Peanuts, toward Harvester Prime Unit 779. "Do you want to hold him? He's really good at making people feel better." The alien stared at the offered toy for a long moment, its feeding appendages twitching with uncertainty. Then, with infinite care, it extended one elongated finger and gently touched the worn fabric of the stuffed elephant. The transformation was immediate. The alien's rigid posture softened, its mechanical movements became more fluid, and for the first time since their arrival on Earth, a Vorthak made a sound that could only be described as wonder. "It possesses comfort properties," it said, its voice filled with amazement. "We had not known that inanimate objects could provide emotional sustenance." Maya grinned. "That's because you never tried being friends with one before. Mr. Peanuts is really good at being friends," and in that moment, watching a 7-year-old girl teach ancient alien refugees about the power of stuffed animals, humanity took its first step toward not just survival, but toward healing wounds that had festered across the galaxy for 12,000 years. The revolution had begun not with weapons or warfare, but with a child's compassion and a worn stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts. The news of Maya's breakthrough spread across the global resistance network faster than anyone thought possible in a world where communication infrastructure had been largely destroyed. Within hours, amateur radio operators, emergency broadcasts, and word of mouth had carried the story to every corner of the Earth. A 7-year-old girl had made peaceful contact with the Vorthak, and the aliens had not only responded, but had begun to show signs of what could only be described as emotional healing. Maya's suburban neighborhood had transformed overnight into the most important location on the planet. Military personnel, scientists, diplomats, and civilians began arriving from around the world, all hoping to witness or participate in what many were calling humanity's first real chance for survival. Dr. Rodriguez had set up a makeshift research station in Maya's school, which had been abandoned since the invasion. The gymnasium now housed an array of improvised scientific equipment, much of it salvaged from destroyed universities and research facilities. The three Vorthak, who had begun to hesitantly accept the human names Maya had given them instead of their unit designations, visited daily for what had become known as comfort sessions. Harvester Prime Unit 779 was now 7, Secondary Unit 423 was Fox, and Secondary Unit 885 was Echo. The names had been Maya's idea, based on their designations, but friendlier, as she put it. The aliens had initially struggled with the concept of individual names not related to function, but they were adapting with surprising speed. The neural plasticity is remarkable, Rodriguez explained to the gathered crowd of researchers and officials who had come to observe the morning session. Despite 12,000 years of adaptation to terror consumption, their brains are showing signs of rewiring themselves in response to positive emotional stimuli. Maya sat cross-legged on a blanket in the center of the gymnasium, with Seven sitting beside her in a posture that was becoming more natural and less rigidly mechanical each day. In her lap sat Mr. Peanuts, while Seven held a small crystal formation that Fox had created using some kind of alien technology. The crystal pulsed with soft, warm light in response to the emotional energy around it. "Tell me again about the singing gardens," Maya requested, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had become the most important diplomat on Earth despite not being old enough for second grade. Seven's feeding appendages, which Dr. Rodriguez's team had learned to read like emotional barometers, curled contentedly as the alien began to speak. The crystal gardens of Vorth Prime were cultivated over millennia. Each formation was grown to resonate with specific harmonics of our star's energy. When the light touched them, they would sing, not with sound as you understand it, but with pure emotional resonance that nourished our spirits as well as our bodies. "And everyone had their own garden?" Maya asked, though she had heard this story dozens of times. "Each family unit maintained its own crystalline cultivation," Fox interjected from where it sat nearby, working on another light crystal with tools that seemed to be part organic technology, part art. The gardens were expressions of individual creativity while contributing to the harmonic symphony of our entire civilization. Echo, who had proven to be the most emotionally expressive of the three, made the soft humming sound that Dr. Rodriguez had identified as their equivalent of contentment. "We took great satisfaction in the beauty we created. The interplay of light, harmony, and growth brought us joy," Maya supplied helpfully. "It brought you joy?" "Yes," Echo said, and there was wonder in its mechanical voice. "Joy. We are beginning to remember joy." Dr. Tesco Rodriguez monitored the readings on her improvised equipment, documenting changes in the aliens' bioelectric signatures that were nothing short of revolutionary. The terror-feeding neural pathways were becoming less dominant, while new networks associated with positive emotional response were strengthening daily. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maya's grandfather Arthur had arrived 3 days earlier, a retired music teacher who had spent 40 years working with children. He had immediately grasped something that the scientific teams had missed. "They're not just healing," he told Dr. Jen Rodriguez quietly during a break in the sessions. "They're learning to be children again. Look at the way Seven plays with that crystal. It's exactly like a kid with a new toy." These beings have been stuck in survival mode for so long, they never had a chance to develop normal social behaviors. Arthur was right. The three Vorthak were displaying behaviors that seemed almost childlike in their curiosity and wonder. They asked endless questions about human culture, were fascinated by simple things like music boxes and picture books, and had developed what could only be described as a protective affection for Maya that bordered on the adorable. "Maya, small human," Seven said during that morning session. "We have been analyzing the mathematical harmonics of what you call lullabies. We believe we understand why these sound patterns produce comfort responses in young humans." "Oh, you figured it out?" Maya asked brightly. "Can you make one?" What happened next would be recorded as one of the most beautiful moments in human-alien relations. Seven began to hum, not the mechanical sound they usually made, but something that carried melody, harmony, and unmistakable emotional warmth. Fox and Echo joined in, their voices creating complex harmonies that seemed to make the air itself shimmer. The improvised lullaby was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It carried elements of whale song, wind chimes, and something that might have been the sound of starlight if starlight could sing. But beneath the alien elements was something unmistakably familiar, the universal language of comfort, of love, of a parent soothing a frightened child. Maya's eyes grew heavy as she listened, and she instinctively curled up against Seven's side. The alien's feeding appendages wrapped around her gently, not to feed but to protect, to comfort, to express an affection that had no words in either language. Remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez whispered, her equipment registering energy patterns she had never seen before. They're not just consuming emotion anymore. They're creating it, sharing it, amplifying it. This is how they must have lived before the catastrophe. Around them, the gathered humans found themselves moved to tears by the alien lullaby. But these were tears of wonder and hope rather than fear, and the Vorthak absorbed this positive emotional energy like desert plants drinking rain. Colonel Martinez, the highest-ranking military officer present, had been skeptical of the entire process until this moment. He had come expecting to witness either humanity's salvation or its final deception before annihilation. Instead, he found himself watching three broken beings learn to love again through the patience and wisdom of a 7-year-old girl. "Doctor," he said quietly to Dr. Rodriguez, "what are the implications for the rest of their species? Are all Vorthak capable of this kind of transformation?" Dr. Rodriguez had been wondering the same thing. According to Seven, there are approximately 2 million Vorthak ships scattered across this galaxy alone. Most of their species exists in a state of constant travel, searching for suitable prey species. If we could establish communication with them, if we could demonstrate that this healing is possible, we could save them all, Arthur finished, understanding, flooding his weathered face. And in saving them, we save ourselves. The sessions continued for another week before the first sign of external contact. Seven, who had maintained communication with the Vorthak fleet through some form of biological radio that Dr. Rodriguez was still trying to understand, announced that other ships were requesting permission to investigate the anomalous energy signatures coming from Earth. "The collective has detected our changes," Seven explained, its voice carrying a note of anxiety. "They do not understand what has occurred. Some believe we have been compromised by human deception. Others theorize that we have discovered a new form of terror essence that produces these unusual readings." Maya, who had grown remarkably sophisticated in her understanding of alien psychology over the past weeks, asked the obvious question, "Are you going to tell them the truth?" Seven's feeding appendages curled inward, a gesture Dr. Rodriguez had learned indicated deep thought rather than distress. "We wish to share this healing with our people, but we also fear they may attempt to correct what they perceive as our malfunction. They're scared," Maya said with her characteristic directness. "They're scared of change because they've been the same way for so long. But you were scared too, and look how much better you feel now." Fox looked up from the intricate crystal sculpture it had been crafting, a beautiful lattice structure that captured and refracted sunlight into rainbow patterns. "Perhaps we could demonstrate rather than explain. Show them the beauty we have rediscovered instead of simply telling them about it." "A cultural exchange," Dr. Rodriguez said suddenly, her scientific mind seizing on the possibility. "Not just between humans and these three, but between the healing Vorthak and their still traumatized species." The plan that emerged over the next several days was audacious in its simplicity. When the investigation ships arrived, they would find not just the three anomalous Vorthak, but a celebration. Humans and aliens working together, creating beauty, sharing joy, demonstrating that terror was not the only form of emotional sustenance available in the universe. Maya's contribution to the planning sessions was typically direct. "We should have a party. Parties make everyone feel better." And so, with the fate of two species hanging in the balance, the most important diplomatic event in human history was planned as a birthday party. Specifically, Maya's 8th birthday, which was coming up in 3 days. The preparations were unlike anything Earth had ever seen. Humans contributed music, food, decorations, and games. The three healing Vorthak shared their knowledge of crystal cultivation, harmonic resonance, and the creation of living light sculptures that responded to emotional energy. Maya's mother, Sarah, who had gone from hiding under kitchen tables to helping plan an interstellar cultural exchange, worked with volunteers to create what she called comfort stations, areas where newly arriving Vorthak could experience positive sensory input without the overwhelming intensity of a full celebration. Arthur composed a special piece of music that incorporated the harmonic principles Seven had shared about their old crystal gardens. Dr. Rodriguez prepared presentations that would demonstrate the scientific basis for emotional healing and neural plasticity. Maya, meanwhile, focused on what she considered the most important element, making sure Mr. Peanuts was ready to meet more alien friends. On the morning of Maya's 8th birthday, sensors detected the approach of 12 Vorthak investigation ships. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, they would have expected to find either a conquered world, stripped bare of terror essence, or perhaps a new form of prey species that had somehow trapped their advanced scouts. Instead, they found something unprecedented in the 12,000-year history of their species. Vorthak singing. 7. Fox and Echo had positioned themselves in the town square, their voices raised in harmonies that carried across the radio spectrum into space. They were singing the song of their healing, the melody of rediscovered joy, the harmony of beings learning to love instead of merely survive. As the investigation ships descended, their crews detected energy signatures that violated everything they understood about emotional consumption. Instead of the sharp, bitter spikes of terror essence, they found warm, complex patterns that seemed to encompass dozens of positive emotional states simultaneously. Maya stood in the center of the celebration, wearing a birthday crown made of recycled aluminum foil, and holding Mr. Peanuts, ready to greet whatever came next with the fearless compassion that had started this impossible chain of events. The first investigation ship landed just as the human children's choir began singing Happy Birthday, while Seven, Fox, and Echo provided harmonic accompaniment in their alien tongue. The sound that emerged was a perfect fusion of two species' capacity for joy, and it changed everything the listening Vorthak thought they knew about the universe. As the ship's hatch began to open, Maya called out cheerfully, "Welcome to my birthday party! We saved you some cake." And somewhere in the cosmos, 12,000 years of pain began its transformation into something beautiful. 6 months after Maya's 8th birthday party changed the course of galactic history, the transformation of human-Vorthak relations had progressed beyond anyone's wildest dreams. The town that had once cowered beneath alien ships now hosted the first interspecies rehabilitation center, where traumatized Vorthak came from across the galaxy to learn what their species had lost 12 millennia ago: how to live without fear. Maya had become something unprecedented, a child ambassador whose understanding of healing transcended the boundaries between species. She spent her mornings in regular school with human children and her afternoons in what everyone called alien kindergarten, where recently arrived Vorthak learned to experience emotions they had thought were lost forever. The breakthrough that made galactic healing possible had come from an unexpected source: Maya's art class. 3 weeks after the birthday party that introduced 47 additional Vorthak to the concept of joy, Maya had been working on a finger painting when she noticed one of the newcomers, a being that had taken the name Harmony, watching her with intense fascination. "Want to try?" Maya had asked, offering the Vorthak a brush loaded with bright blue paint. What happened next revolutionized their understanding of Vorthak biology. As Harmony tentatively dabbed paint onto paper, its feeding appendages began to glow with a warm golden light that was completely different from the harsh blue they emitted during terror feeding. The alien's entire body started to shimmer with bioluminescent patterns that Dr. Pan, Rodriguez's team, had never documented. "I can taste the colors," Harmony whispered in wonder. "The blue carries the essence of sky happiness. The yellow holds warmth comfort. I am feeding, but not on fear," Dr. said. Rodriguez, who was documenting everything, realized they had discovered something revolutionary. The Vorthak could feed on the emotional energy contained within creative expression, art, music, storytelling, even play, and this energy was not only more nutritious than terror. It was actually healing the neurological damage caused by 12,000 years of trauma feeding. Within a month, Vorthak ships were arriving daily, their crews desperate to experience what the galactic community had begun calling the Maya effect. The aliens who came were often barely functional, their feeding appendages atrophied from consuming only the basest form of emotional energy, their minds locked in survival patterns that had become neurological prisons. But under Maya's patient guidance, they began to heal. The process wasn't always easy. Many of the arriving Vorthak had never experienced positive emotions and found the intensity overwhelming. Some suffered what Dr. Safande Rodriguez termed joy shock, a neurological overload when their terror-adapted brains encountered happiness, love, or wonder for the first time in millennia. Maya had developed her own therapy for these cases. She would sit quietly with the overwhelmed aliens, Mr. Peanuts in her lap, and simply talk to them about normal things: the weather, her favorite foods, what she learned in school. Her calm presence and gentle chatter seemed to act as a buffer, allowing the aliens to experience positive emotions in small, manageable doses. The small human possesses innate healing properties, Seven observed to Dr. Rodriguez during one of their research sessions. Seven had become something like Maya's unofficial translator, helping newly arrived Vorthak understand human customs and emotional concepts. Her emotional emanations create a field of safety that allows our people to lower their defensive barriers. Seven had changed dramatically over the months. Its movements had become fluid and graceful. Its voice had developed tonal qualities that conveyed warmth and humor, and its feeding appendages had evolved into something more like additional limbs capable of delicate manipulation and artistic expression. It was, Rodriguez realized, becoming what the Vorthak were supposed to be before trauma transformed them into creatures of pure survival. Fox had developed an obsession with human music and was working with Arthur to compose the first interspecies symphonies. The aliens' understanding of harmonic mathematics had revolutionized human music theory, while exposure to human creativity had reawakened Fox's own artistic abilities. Echo had discovered a talent for storytelling and spent hours with Maya's classmates, sharing tales of the ancient Vorthak civilization while learning human fairy tales and legends. The alien stories were helping human children understand that the beings who had once terrorized them were not monsters, but refugees who had lost their way. But it was the transformation of the newcomers that provided the most hope for the future. Harmony, the Vorthak who had discovered joy through finger painting, had become a teacher for others of its species. It helped newly arrived aliens learn to process positive emotions without becoming overwhelmed, using art therapy techniques that combined human psychological principles with Vorthak neural optimization methods. A Vorthak who had chosen the name Melody discovered it could feed on the emotional content of human lullabies and had begun creating what it called sleep songs, alien melodies that helped human children troubled by nightmares to find peaceful rest. The songs were becoming popular throughout the rehabilitation center, used by both species for comfort and healing. Another, calling itself Story, had learned to sustain itself entirely on the wonder and excitement children felt during story time. It had begun creating elaborate holographic tales that combined human narrative traditions with Vorthak sensory technology, producing stories that could be seen, heard, and emotionally felt. Dr. Rodriguez documented each case, building a comprehensive understanding of Vorthak psychology and biology that was revolutionizing xenopsychology. But perhaps more importantly, she was documenting proof that even the most severe psychological trauma could heal given the right environment and care. The breakthrough that would change everything came during Maya's first attempt at teaching a Vorthak to laugh. The alien in question had arrived 3 days earlier in a state of near-complete shutdown. Its species designation had been Harvester Prime Unit 1017, but it had lost the ability to even process its own identity. It sat motionless in the rehabilitation center, its feeding appendages completely retracted, its bioluminescent systems dim to the point of near extinction. Maya had been trying everything: stories, music, art, even games, but nothing seemed to reach the damaged alien. Finally, in frustration, she decided to try something she knew always cheered her up: silly jokes. "Why don't aliens ever land at airports?" Maya asked, sitting cross-legged in front of the motionless Vorthak. No response. "Because they're looking for space." Maya delivered the punchline with her characteristic enthusiasm. Still, nothing. Maya tried several more jokes before switching to what Arthur called physical comedy. She began making silly faces, walking in exaggerated ways and generally acting ridiculous in an effort to provoke some kind of response. Finally, after Maya had spent 10 minutes pretending to be a duck that couldn't figure out how to walk, something unprecedented happened. The alien made a sound, a soft, rhythmic exhalation that Dr. Rodriguez realized was the Vorthak equivalent of laughter. But this wasn't just psychological healing. As the alien laughed, its entire biology began to transform. Its feeding appendages emerged from their retracted state and began to pulse with warm golden light. Its skin brightened from near gray to a healthy translucent silver. Most remarkably, its neurological readings showed massive activation in brain regions that had been dormant. Laughter, Rodriguez breathed, watching her instruments record the impossible. Laughter is triggering complete neurological regeneration. Maya grinned at the laughing alien and said, "I'm going to call you Giggles, okay? Do you like that name?" The newly named Giggles responded with what could only be described as delighted chortling, and Maya knew they had discovered something that would echo across the galaxy. Over the following weeks, laughter therapy became the most effective treatment for severely traumatized Vorthak. Maya and her classmates became the primary therapists, their natural ability to find joy in simple things providing exactly what the aliens needed to rediscover their capacity for happiness. But the real revolution came when the healed Vorthak began to return to space. 7. Fox and Echo had been among the first to depart, carrying with them not only their own healing but detailed knowledge of the rehabilitation process. They traveled from ship to ship throughout the Vorthak fleet, sharing what they had learned and bringing other damaged beings back to Earth for treatment. Within months, a network of rehabilitation centers began appearing throughout human space, each one staffed by humans who had learned Maya's techniques and healed Vorthak, who served as guides for their still traumatized kin. The transformation was not limited to the aliens. Humans who participated in the rehabilitation program found their own trauma from the invasion healing in unexpected ways. Children who had hidden in terror during the fear harvests discovered strength in helping others overcome their pain. Adults who had felt helpless against cosmic forces found purpose in nurturing healing across species boundaries. Maya's parents had become coordinators for the growing network of rehabilitation centers. Sarah used her organizational skills to manage the complex logistics of interspecies therapy, while David applied his military experience to protect the vulnerable aliens from extremist human groups who still saw them as enemies. Arthur had become the director of the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Program, using his lifetime of experience with children to help adult Vorthak rediscover their capacity for play and wonder. Dr. Rodriguez had been appointed head of the new Xenopsychological Research Institute, where teams of human and Vorthak scientists work together to understand the biological and psychological mechanisms underlying their unprecedented healing process. But Maya remained at the center of it all, a 9-year-old girl whose simple conviction that even the scariest beings could learn to be friends had transformed two species' understanding of what was possible. On the first anniversary of First Contact, Maya stood in the same suburban street where she had first greeted Seven, Fox, and Echo. But now the street was filled with beings from across the galaxy, not just Vorthak, but representatives from dozens of species who had heard about the healing miracle and come to learn from it. The Vorthak had shared their story throughout their travels, and other species who had been victims of their terror harvesting had begun arriving to witness the transformation of their former tormentors. Many came seeking revenge, but left seeking healing for their own trauma. The galactic community was slowly learning what Maya had understood from the beginning. Fear was not power, it was pain. And pain, no matter how ancient or alien, could heal when met with patience, compassion, and the simple recognition that all beings, regardless of their past, deserved the chance to become better. As Maya watched a group of young Vorthak playing with human children, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in rhythm with laughter that echoed across species boundaries, she hugged Mr. Peanuts and smiled. She had learned something important in the past year. The adults always talked about saving the world or changing the galaxy, but really, all you had to do was be kind to one person at a time. Or, in this case, one alien at a time. Seven approached her, its movements now graceful and expressive, its feeding appendages curled in what she had learned was the Vorthak gesture of affection. Small human Maya, it said, its voice warm with emotion that would have been impossible 12 months earlier. We have received communication from the farthest reaches of our territory. Vorthak ships that have not known peace for 12,000 years are requesting guidance to find Earth. They wish to learn what we have learned. Maya looked up at her friend, for that's what Seven had become, simply and completely her friend, and said what she always said when faced with the impossible. Well, then we'd better get ready for more friends. In the distance, new ships were already appearing in Earth's sky, but this time, they came not as harbingers of terror, but as pilgrims seeking healing. And waiting for them in a small suburban town was a girl with a stuffed elephant and an infinite capacity for believing that everyone, even the scariest someones, could learn to be better. The universe had learned to heal, one hug at a time. And Maya had learned the most important truth of all. The greatest power wasn't fear or force or any of the things that adults worried about. The greatest power was simply refusing to give up on someone, no matter how lost they seemed. Because sometimes, all it took to save the galaxy was a child who saw friends where everyone else saw monsters. The fear that had been their power had become something far greater, the foundation upon which an entirely new kind of civilization could be built. A civilization based not on the consumption of terror, but on the cultivation of joy. And it all began with a 7-year-old girl who wasn't afraid to say hello.